Welcome to another episode of Voyages. Voyages is a podcast where I, Gaurav, speak to successful business and technology leaders to share their journey with everyone. Our next guest on the podcast is Mr. Vishal Kapur. Holding a bachelor's degree from BITS Pilani and an MBA from Chicago Booth, Mr. Kapoor has worked with companies like SAP, Booz Allen and Hamilton, Boston Consulting Group, and subsequently started an EdTech venture that caters to supplemental education for school children in the after school segment. Welcome, Vishal. It's such a pleasure and honor to have you on my podcast.
Hi, Gaurav. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Fantastic. Vishal, such a always such a pleasure to speak to you. It's something that I really look forward to, really cherish. So tell us a little bit about your initial journey, Vishal, your school, your college, something that we've never really spoken about in between the two of us. Love to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, so Gaurav, as you know, I grew up in Delhi and went to St. Columbus School, for 13 years. Was part of the school since kindergarten, and I was fortunate to, in fact, be introduced to computer science in school itself. Ours was the first school, one of the first schools in India to introduce computers in the early 80s. And from a young class, I was fascinated by computers. So that is something that stands out. Made a lot of friends, and I think schooling is really the foundation because it helped me identify what I wanted to do. Was lucky enough to get into BITS Pilani at that stage. Did my engineering, and again BITS Pilani. At BITS Pilani, in fact, I did a dual degree, which is like an engineering in chemical engineering and masters in physics. And with that dual degree, I always felt that I'm still searching for what I really wanted. Wasn't very keen on taking up a role in engineering, but computers and software kept fascinating me. And that's when I got an opportunity to work with SAP. And I think that was my initial calling. I was very fascinated by what SAP had to offer in terms of an enterprise solution. And being a young person joining a global company, working in their office in their head office in Waldorf in Germany, in Singapore, and also in Bangalore, gave me a lot of exposure. And I think that those were my formative years. I've been fortunate to get some really good, wide, diverse experience.
Yeah. Also talk a little bit about your education at Chicago. So that is something that I've spoken. You've spoken quite often to me. What is the basic difference between, let's say, studying in Chicago versus studying in India? How's been your experience like?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. It's very different actually. An MBA from a US university is very different from an MBA in India. And I was already in the US. I worked with SAP in India, Singapore, and Germany. And after a couple of years, I found an opportunity to work with a consulting firm in the US that was an implementation partner of SAP. So and this was in the late 90s. So there was a lot of the Y2K rush to implement new solutions, and ERP and SAP especially were riding that wave. And so my exposure had been more on the, I would say, on the functional side, less on the technical system architecture side. So I helped SAP develop a solution. In fact, I was part of the product development that created the HR solution for Asian countries. And when I moved to the US, I was helping SAP clients implement the HR and payroll solutions for the US market. So I had always been on the functional side, understanding the basic requirements of the customer, working with, doing a little bit of development on my own, but also working with the systems engineers to actually create the right solution for our clients. And that's when I felt that doing an MBA, moving into, I'd already been exposed to project management. I was leading teams as a project manager while I was working in the US, but I always wanted to get on to the management side and look at things from a strategic business angle. And that's where I got the opportunity to do an MBA, a full-time MBA with Chicago Booth, and that really opened up a lot of different perspectives for me. It was not only an international exposure. In fact, almost 1/3, or probably more than 1/3 of the class, incoming class, is international students. So you get to meet people from literally over 100 countries. So at one level, it gave a very diverse, exposure in terms of, the number of countries represented, but also a very deep experience on the business side. So Chicago Booth has some of the best faculty, Nobel laureates. I was actually a student under Professor Raghuram Rajan. Took his class in finance, was very inspired. He was, of course, not the RBI governor then, but he was still one of the most sought after professors at Chicago Booth. And, and the focus was really on going deep into each subject, whether it was finance, strategy, marketing, and developing the core fundamentals. And I think that curriculum has really stood by me. And in fact, I've seen a lot of business solutions with the prism and with the sort of a framework that we learned in business school. So it was not only good experience in terms of the peer network, but also deep academic experience, depth in the academic program. And also, it gave me, the right job after I graduated. I wanted the right job, moved into strategy consulting. So I think I wouldn't have been able to move from product development and a technical role to management consulting had I not done my MBA at Chicago Booth.
Fantastic. I think that's such a great thing, because I think aligning your interests with your career, I think that is something that I think that realization came in little very early for you. I think I also have very similar stories in that sense. So I also pursued physics when I started my career.
I didn't know that part of you, Gaurav. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So
I do know that you started coding when you were 7 years old, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I think that I think so when I was while I was hearing you, I realized that there is a lot of a lot of commonalities in a way. So the era might be somewhat 5, 6 years, 10 years different, but it was still very, very similar for me as well. So I got exposure to computer science very early in my school days as well. And also, with my first ever college education started with St. Stephen's College in Delhi, where I was doing BSc in physics honors. So I worked there. I studied there for about a year and a half. I just realized it's not really what I want to do in my life. So dropped out from there, and people call me crazy crazy for dropping out from St. Stephen's, which is one of the most sought after colleges in probably the entire world. And then moved to Vellore. So it was a difficult move, but in retrospect, I think it paid off really well. And I think the story is very similar between the two of us, which is, you have a certain, you know that you're made for something. So why not align our goals? Why not align our goals with the education, and let the education help us reach there? That is the thought process that even I had. And I think I could see very similar narrative from your story as well.
Absolutely. And it does take a lot of courage to actually, continue focusing on the path that you want to pursue, because there are pressures from all sides, and very often you don't know what you want. So you have to explore, and you have to discover. And in fact, it wasn't easy for me too. Initially, even though I joined physics, like, physics wasn't my cup of tea, even though, to the extent that I enjoy watching Discovery Channel and learning more about modern physics. That's all my interest was, but I never could imagine taking up a career in physics. And chemical engineering again wasn't my forte, but I'd always been into software and management, and I think I got the right mix of both these fields, and especially finance, because the subsequent years that I spent both at BCG in India and subsequently after BCG as a for a few years at a private equity fund, were more focused on finance strategy and really helping solve the core business problems and helping companies literally scale up. In some cases, it was large companies that did not have a problem of scaling up, but really maintaining their market share, understanding where to develop, first identifying their competitive advantage, and then building on that competitive advantage. And strategy consulting gives you that sort of a perspective, and yeah, gives you a sort of a toolkit, I should say, in terms of frameworks to think about problems and apply those frameworks in various different situations.
Absolutely. I think I love that. I love that approach of having frameworks and toolkits to basically apply to different problems. I think it just keeps your focus very, I think just gives you a nice way to systematically solve problems rather than coming up with indigenous solutions needlessly for every time there's a problem that that you face. So
Absolutely.
love that approach. And I mean, I'm not an MBA, but at least I also have a very strong belief that many problems in the world are already solved, and don't have to necessarily come up with indigenous solutions every time that same problem comes to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So software, then management, then finance, then strategy, and then edtech. So now, so the next big step in your careers now was about moving into your own into your own company, starting your own venture. Very different, but still very related to what you've done in your career so far. So Vishal, how did that happen, and why edtech, for example?
Yeah, no, that's I feel there are things that as long as you pursue your passion, what your destiny is will actually, you will find that destiny. So for me, I was once I was working at a private equity fund. Moving from the BCG, I felt that I was always interested in starting my own venture, but I used the time that I worked at the private equity fund to explore ideas, network with people. For me, it was a first generation entrepreneur. No one else in my family has had any entrepreneurial experience. So for me, it was a little bit of learning and going up that steep curve. The good thing is that working for a fund as an investor, gave me a very different exposure, from a board level that wouldn't that typically I wouldn't have got if I was working either for a corporate or in a consulting environment. And the common thread between consulting and investing for a fund is that you are not working in one specific sector. You are looking at business problems. As a consultant, you are solving those business problems, and as an investor, you understand the business problems and you identify companies with a competitive advantage that can benefit from their space. So as an investor, you tend to identify the companies that you think will scale, and grass is always greener on the other side. We always felt that the investors put in the money, and entrepreneurs are the ones who are making all the returns. It Little did I know that things are not so easy as an entrepreneur, but I think the journey is a lot more satisfying. I spent my years at the private equity fund exploring various industries. And education has always been close to my heart. My sister has been a school teacher for over 20 years. And, right around the time she had started her own sort of a little center where she was teaching kids from school in a very different way, teaching children courses that would really supplement learning in school. What we call, what we call 21st century skills, which is really helping children in developing good communication skills, problem solving, analytical thinking, and not focusing on the rote learning, which has been the focus of schools. Just excelling in academics for the sake of getting marks is not. That really the focus should be. Unfortunately, our schools are designed that way because the school's performance is also judged based on the performance of the children in the board exams and other exams. So I think that, in my opinion, is fast losing its relevance. I think the new education policy that has been announced by the government is a step in that direction, because there's a lot of focus that needs to be done. A lot of focus needs to be put on courses that go beyond just the academics, and I felt that that aspect really needed to scale up. And so initially, it was my sister who was running the center. With my traditional analytical tools, I said that should be easy. We should be able to scale up, and we should be able to open a lot more centers. Unfortunately, education is not so easy to scale up, right? And we kind of looked at that idea for a while, and discovered the challenges that scaling up physical centers entails. But we kept working at it. And for a while, I had I'd started working on a part-time basis with my fund, and working on solving this problem on a part-time basis. But it was very interesting, because a lot of things in that do work in other industries don't necessarily work in education. And the most important being that you can advertise your way through, you can give the best deal and sell a product on an e-commerce platform, because ultimately, if you're buying the product, if it's a phone or it's a laptop, you're ultimately buying that product. So you'll go to whichever portal gives you the best deal. Education is slightly different, because parents want to get the best learning outcome for their children, right? It's not the best deal. So it's not that easy to scale up by saying, okay, I'll reduce my prices, and because I offer the lowest prices, customers will start coming to me. It doesn't work like that in education. So it takes a lot longer to develop the trust. Ultimately, it is the trust that you develop with the students and their parents. In this case, because the children are small, the parents are the ones who are the deciding factor. And so that takes time. Building the trust takes time. Building the sort of a pedagogy around education takes time, and to be recognized and for the word of mouth to work takes time. And which we realized early on. And but the last 1 year has taught us many lessons as well, because the pandemic has in a way forced certain changes in the consumer, and also the teachers, right? The parents are willing to take online classes, teachers are willing to teach online, and therefore I think we are now working towards a much more scalable solution. And we recently launched a new startup which actually focuses on EdTech as a platform. And rather than scaling up the physical centers, which was the old venture that my sister and I had started, we are now working on building an EdTech platform, which will be like a platform for educators to do courses that are curated by us, and we will help them scale.
Fantastic. So when before we move to how COVID affected your business, I think one thing that I'm actually very fascinated about at all times is that India is a country which is obsessed with marks, with cutoffs, with percentages, with GPAs. So in such a mindset, how does an offering like a 21st century skill, for example, how hard is it for you to convince people or tell parents that this is a skill or these are skills which are perhaps equally important, and I would say perhaps even more important to some extent than your curriculum and your academic skills. Is that a difficult sell, or is that something that people have gradually now started adopting and understanding?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Typically, the awareness for such courses is low, and therefore, for a long time, these courses remained on the fringe. However, I think there's a huge market now on the fringe itself. So if you compare with the regular academic tuitions, this market is much smaller than that. Uh, but the awareness is increasing, and the awareness is increasing simply because the parents themselves realize that when if the parents themselves in their own careers have at some point realize the importance of good communication skills, good collaboration skills, the ability to work together as teams, and these are ideas that courses which are specialized, and we are known for developing these courses. So it's I think it gives for the market that exists. It is growing at a much rapid pace, but it is much smaller than the traditional academic courses. Having said that, there are external forces that are helping this market grow. The new education policy, like I said, has put a lot more emphasis on this, and as new curriculum gets created, and over the next 5 to 10 years, if I were to extrapolate this out, in fact, 21st century skills should be incorporated within the academic curriculum itself. And rather than teaching as part of just a lecture based teaching, where students are taught a particular lesson, I think the style of teaching will go a bit of a change, and the facilitators, the teachers, will actually transform into facilitators, where they will facilitate group activities, which will enable the children to discover the answers rather than being told what the answer is. And I think that will have a much better learning impact. So I think over the next 5 to 10 years, this will be the dominant way of teaching, and that is what we are gearing up for.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. In terms of, so just to give you my perspective on how even I feel these skills are extremely important, as a very different kind of a move as an employer myself. What we did was we started English coaching for our team members. So, that is
Brilliant.
something that we've recently introduced. And, some people, it's like obviously very, very important. For example, sales people, HR people, they are like really important. And even for people who aspire to be team leaders and let's say engineering managers of tomorrow, I think I've always emphasized to my team that okay, technical skills is I mean that's absolutely the prerequisite, but unless you have really solid communication skills, for example, you will never be able to rise beyond a certain point in your career. So that is the kind of grooming that we also started as internally within our company, and
Yeah,
many people have become a part of it, and now that they are going through it, they have actually started realizing how important it is, Vishal. So it's not just
yeah,
at just not just I mean at learning these things at school level, at college,
yeah.
at
Right.
a beginning level. I think
Yeah,
definitely is so much more easier and so much more long. I mean that knowledge stays with you forever. But even now, I think with my company, as I took that step, so that at least people who have not been fortunate enough to get 21st century skill guidance at an early stage in their life, I think at least
yeah,
some point of time in future, we might want to tell them, hey guys, this is something that's really important.
yeah. And even for kids, what our teachers tell us is that being able to write effectively is a strong advantage for the child, because very often the children know the answer, but they are not able to either effectively communicate that right answer if the teacher picks on the child, or are not able to express themselves in an examination if they are asked to write about that. So the ability to to express themselves, whether it's verbally or in a written answer, is a skill that a lot of children lack today. And I think we are working towards such things. um, and like you mentioned, it's imperative. I think our in the 21st century, people need to have that, and you can't just develop this in college and say, okay, I'll take a couple of weeks of crash course and learn that. It has to be part of the learning journey of the student right from the beginning.
Absolutely, Vishal. Absolutely. So talking about COVID, I think so everybody knows that it created a massive impact. I think me and you have had several conversations around the impact of COVID, how that's changing Cedarwood, how that's changing your company. One of the things that I think we all know is that it's created new opportunities both for students as well as teachers, both sides. But one of the things that I'm very fascinated to know is that, Vishal, how has it affected the effectiveness of the teaching? So basically teachers who used to teach students inside a classroom are now having to teach students on a monitor or on a computer. And similarly, students who were habitual of waking up, putting in their bags, going to schools, and coming back in the afternoon, whatever, now are just essentially waking up and sitting in front of a laptop.
Yeah.
This is great because very scalable. I think from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. I think a lot opens up a lot of opportunities for both teachers as well as students, which may not have existed before. But what is the effectiveness of the education? Is the online teaching still as effective for students as much as the classroom model was? Is it better? Is it like worse? What is your stand on that?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great question. So far, I think most of the online education has been a sort of a way to replace the physical classes, because that was what was the sort of an immediate requirement as a result of COVID, as a result of the pandemic. And in fact, what happened, in fact, that's what we did too, because we literally within a week, we transformed the entire sort of set of classes that we were doing in our physical centers into an online platform, and which is the beginning, the first step. But going forward, with the sort of tools that are available, with the right, digital content and the sort of tools that enable personalized content to be delivered to the students, I think online education has a lot more, I would say, effectiveness than a traditional class. However, the only thing that a physical class can do better, which an online class cannot do, and which is relevant for children at a much younger age, like literally at 4 or 5 years old, it's not so much about the content or that you are engaging the child with. The more important aspect is around motivating the child, understanding the needs of the child, and building a rapport between the teacher and the child. Because very often the teacher has to kind of encourage the child to do a little bit more, maybe put in some effort into learning one aspect. And therefore it with especially, I have seen that with younger children, that that rapport between the teacher and the bond between the teacher and the student is a lot more important. And therefore for the younger age groups, I think once the pandemic is over, we'll probably come back to a mixed sort of set of classes with a mixture of physical as well as online classes. And I think that right mix of if on of online and online, sorry, offline and online would be the key to watch out for. And I think we are building our platform to be able to deliver that offline in a sort of a hyper local model, and online, along with the online classes that we already do.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely, Vishal. I think that sounds very logical. I think that is probably that's very similar for the workplace as well. People have very similar thoughts around the workplace, where they feel that a completely, the new era will be about hybrid workplaces, where some part of the team will be working online, some of them will be working offline, and they will
Right.
probably have a hybrid model where both teams are collaborating in similar ways. So yeah, I think that I mean the trend can pretty much be extrapolated to the edtech industry, education industry as well, I guess.
Right.
Um, in terms of, so Vishal, you've had a very solid career. I think a lot of great education, a very very high flying career before you started this company. Um, what is your take on senior professionals who have an aspiration to become an entrepreneur? What is it that you recommend? A good, well-paying, senior respectable job, or take the plunge and go for an entrepreneurship if that's what fascinates them, because it's one of those things that many people are sorting answers for. It's not very easy to make that leap either, but what is your take on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In fact, a lot of people have pondered on that question, and I've been asked that question a lot before. I don't think there is a straight answer which applies to everyone, and because people are different, and I think not only are people different, people have go through different stages of their life, and they make decisions. The decision I made when I was 25 was very different from the decision, say, that I made when I was 40, right? So I think that is something that someone has to sort of discover on their own. There are and you have to figure out what sort of a personality you are, right? What a large organization does is to provide you sort of a stability in the career, and it provides you like the certainty of the path that you expect the organization to grow, and you are expected to deliver on that. And if you like that, if you're comfortable in that environment, you could actually do wonders by actually accelerating the path of that organization. You're not typically, in large organizations, you're not discovering a path of your own, right? And if you feel that you'd rather and if you feel you can do well with uncertainty, and you'd rather chart a new course, then entrepreneurship is right for you. Of course, charting a new course is not that easy. Very often, you will reach dead ends, and you either have to have the courage to stop and say, okay, I'm not pursuing this anymore, or you'll have to say, okay, let me take a step back and I'll start all over again, because I'm confident that I'll find my path, right? So depending on what sort of a personality you are, you should be able to decide on your own. But entrepreneurship is not for everyone, but for those who are willing to discover a new path and maybe create a path for others to follow. And if you are comfortable working in uncertain environments, then I would invite everyone to look at entrepreneurship, because while it is the uncertainty is unnerving, at the end of it, you know there are moments that you will cherish. So that is all I would say at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the ability to make sense and ability to fight through uncertainty and make your way forward, take your make a path in that jungle of uncertainty, so to speak. I think Vishal, that is really, I think, in my opinion, the biggest the biggest characteristic trait that defines a successful entrepreneur. Because I think the other way that I also think about it is that, say, no matter which job you are doing, the company is always putting you in a very systematic flow, a certain structure, where your part is to handle certain part of it. Your job is
Yeah,
to handle a certain part of the overall system, and it may be 1/100th of what the company does, or it can be 1/10th of what the company does, depending on your role. But you still have a very well defined structure, very well defined role that you have to play.
yeah,
Whereas being an entrepreneur, I think it just makes it like, you pretty much can do anything, everything. Now it is up to you to decide what you really want to do, how you would like to do it, and whether your actions are actually creating any meaningful impact or not. I think so
Right.
that, as at least for me as well, that is how I started looking at entrepreneurship myself.
Right. Right.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
it's filled with challenges all throughout. I think you would have also experienced many of them. Any particular challenges in edtech specifically that you would like to talk us about? Anything that you felt was the probably the most ridiculous, horrible, difficult challenge to pass, or to basically fight through.
No, I think every sector has its own challenges. EdTech itself, we are into B2C, so very. In fact, many of our challenges that I have personally faced would be common to many other B2C companies. But EdTech is unique in the sense that simply because of the scale up, right? And in the companies in edtech, in fact, most of the companies in edtech have not figured out yet what would be the right go-to-market strategy for scaling up, and discovering the right go-to-market strategy, discovering what would be the way to generate organic growth, because especially in education, more than any other industry, it is the organic growth that really matters, right? And if in fact, I say this to people in my organization, that for every child that comes in for one single course, we have to make it 4 times, right? Because we want the next year the child should do 2 courses with us, and they should refer 2 other children to do 2 courses with us, right? So, and therefore, that is the organic growth, that really makes sense, because only if we do a good job with the child, especially with their learning outcomes, and the parents are happy with it, will they continue with us and make the referrals. And I think word of mouth is the most important thing in edtech, in education, I should say. And therefore, it's not easy to like put in a lot of money and expect to get sustainable long-term growth. So you could grow with a lot of money. We've seen brand ambassadors, celebrities actually coming in and doing that job. But I think that's not a permanent solution. Like the companies that ultimately will sustain are the companies that will create the learning outcomes, the difference in the child in terms of their learning outcomes in the long term.
Definitely, I think that's absolutely correct, Vishal. Absolutely agree on that. And to end this particular podcast on a slightly lighter note, Vishal. So we'd love to also know, what are your interests, what are your passions, what does Vishal do on a Sunday? What are things outside of Cedarwood and outside your business which keep you engaged, which keep you involved?
Yeah, I enjoy watching movies. I love watching movies with my family on Sundays. Typically the pandemic has really turned things around in that sense. But I also enjoy going out and eating out. Haven't done that in a long time. I love traveling.
Yeah.
So at least once in 3-4 months, we as a family, we travel at least 3 times in a year. So I hope to get back to that soon.
Yeah, I think everybody does want to get back to that soon. And I see a lot of books in your background as well. So do you read a lot?
I used to read a lot. In fact, most of these books are my wife's. She's a lawyer, so the
Okay.
lawyers typically tend to keep books in their shelves.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do occasionally read more nonfiction than fiction, and but I love to travel more. So when I'm traveling, I'd love to pick up a book and read.
Yeah. I think this traveler bug. I think this I think we're just all waiting for COVID to come down to at least minimal levels, that we can
Yeah,
all start our journeys together. Just start exploring the world as we used to. I think this is one of those. I think people who are travelers. I think for them COVID has been the biggest problem, because even for me, for example, I haven't been able to travel for past 2 years, I think, almost now, 1.5
right,
year at least, actually. And
right.
I'm sure it's very similar story for a lot of other people who really, like somebody like you who wants to travel 3 times a year, somebody like me who's put a self personal target of at least 2 times a year. So
Yeah.
I think all the plans have been, have not been able to, we've not been able to materialize those plans for a long time now.
No, and hopefully very soon we'll get back to that normal state.
Hopefully, yes, hopefully, absolutely. So yeah, Vishal, I think thanks a lot today for, for joining this podcast. It's been, like I said, it's always such a big pleasure for me to speak to you, understand your journey. I think I've been working together for a long time now, building your products, building the journey, understanding your industry so closely, and trying to do the best of our ability in terms of offering you at least the technology that can help you drive your business. So that's been such a pleasure, as well, working with you and being associated with you for such a long time.
Yeah, thank
uh,
you, Gaurav, and you've been such a great support all through these years, helping us develop our products. So thanks a lot, and thank you also for your time today.
Thank you, Vishal, such a pleasure. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.